Alex Bessler and one of his friends were on a morning hike in the mountains of Arizona when out of nowhere a large swarm of hostile bees attacked. Alex, who was 23, was overtaken by the aggressive bees and was stung over 1,000 times. Several people attempted to help Alex as he laid on the ground completely covered in bees, withering in pain and screaming. But every rescuer's attempt was driven back by the angry swarm. The county sheriff, Sergeant Alan Romer, finally used a utility vehicle to get close and was able to move Alex onto the UTV and remove him from the scene, still covered in bees and the swarm chasing them. Alex was then taken to a local hospital where he was sadly pronounced dead. His friend, however, was able to escape the bees and seek shelter in a nearby restroom. Sergeant Romer, who was stationed in the area for 16 years, said it was by far the worst bee attack he had ever seen. He was also stung a lot, but not nearly as much as Alex. I am completely terrified of bees, so this whole story just gives me complete chills. I can't imagine getting chased by a whole swarm of bees and getting stung thousands of times. Rest in peace, Alex. This was just an awful death. This is the most disturbing sporting accident ever. In 1991, the Labrathorn race was cancelled due to a horrible skiing accident. Gernot Reinstandler, a 20-year-old contestant, was going downhill at full speed when he suddenly lost control as he was approaching the finish line and then slammed head-on into safety nets at extremely high speeds. This then trapped one of his skis inside the net, which resulted in his leg almost being completely torn off. He then began spinning out of control with a trail of blood following him, staining the entire mountain. His body then stops at the bottom of the hill as a pool of blood forms around him and people come over to help. He also fractured his pelvis and was literally ripped in half. The impact caused serious internal injuries, fractures, and nerve damage. He was transported by a helicopter to a hospital where he received multiple blood transfusions. But despite receiving blood transfusions before and after the operations, he passed away from severe pelvic bleeding. This is just awful, and what makes it worse is that there's a video of the whole situation unfolding on the internet. Rest in peace to Gernot, and what a terrible, terrible accident. In Japan, a school teacher named Yumi Tanaka was about to make the most disturbing discovery of her life. At around 5 p.m., right before she was about to go home, she decided to use the bathroom. When she entered the cubicle, she noticed something she never saw before. Inside the toilet bowl was a black shoe. Yumi then decided to investigate further and stuck her head inside the sewer tank. And what she discovered scarred her forever. Inside the tank were a pair of human feet. She then screamed and her coworkers came running. Police came and discovered the feet were connected to a full body inside the tank. The body was difficult to move and firefighters and a crane had to assist in moving it. The body inside was 26-year-old Naoki Kana and he was covered in feces, and his cause of death was hypothermia. He was dead for 3 days and he got into the toilet pipes voluntarily and squeezed inside to spy on girls using the bathroom. This is absolutely disturbing, and can you imagine going to the bathroom and then finding somebody inside the toilet looking at you? In 2022, a call was made by a woman named Sheila Fletcher claiming her daughter Lacey Fletcher had passed away while her and her husband were out for the weekend. And in no time, the police and ambulance arrived at their place, and what they saw might be the most horrific thing ever. Lacey Fletcher, who was 36, was found half naked and fused to the couch in her own feces, urine, and maggots. She also weighed only 96 pounds. Her body was completely melted into the couch. Doctors claimed she was sitting on the couch for 12 consecutive years without moving at all. Lacey was a very cheerful person until 9th grade when she decided to be homeschooled. She had multiple mental illnesses including autism, Asperger's, and social anxiety. She also had locked-in syndrome, a condition when the entire person's body is paralyzed except for their eye muscles. Her parents neglected her condition and let her rot to death. She was kept starved and ate sofa foam as bite marks were found on the couch, and they found sofa foam in her stomach during the autopsy. This is the couch Lacey was on for 12 years straight, and the most shocking part is that her parents would sit on their own recliner, which was just a few feet away from the couch, meaning her parents were accustomed to the condition, atmosphere, and the bad odor. Her parents also claimed Lacey chose to never leave the couch, but how could she? Her parents were sentenced to 20 years in prison for this awful and disturbing crime. 19-year-old Angelo Hayes probably went through the most remarkable situation ever. He was riding his motorcycle in 1937 when he suddenly got into a bad crash and was thrown headfirst into a brick wall. and he was believed to be dead. They then buried him, and soon after, a suspicious insurance agent came to inquire about the policy Hayes' father had taken out on his son. Angelo was then dug out of his grave 2 days after his burial, and to everyone's surprise, he was still alive. He slipped into a coma. As his body required less oxygen in this state, Angelo managed to survive the ordeal. After a couple of surgeries and rehabilitation, Hayes lived to tell the tale of his live burial. He became a celebrity throughout France and also invented a security coffin complete with a radio transmitter, food locker, library, and chemical toilet, just in case anyone found themselves in his same awful situation. In 2018, neighbors noticed 83-year-old Dorothy Mae Neal hadn't been seen in a couple of days. After a couple more days, neighbors began worrying that she died in her home. So they knocked on her door, but there was no response. Police were then called, and when they arrived, they noticed droplets of dried blood outside her home. They then made their way inside and found Dorothy lying on her back on the ground. Dorothy was naked and badly beaten. She was also covered in blood. She was then taken to the hospital where she died. There was evidence something strange happened as used condoms were found next to her body, and a lamp was broken, covered in blood, and was used to smash her head in. 14-year-old Tyrone Harvin, who Dorothy used to watch, was responsible for this. The condoms were tested, and Tyrone's DNA was a perfect match. His blood was also at the crime scene. Tyrone sexually assaulted Dorothy in a number of ways and hit her so hard with the lamp that she had multiple fractures to her skull. Tyrone was helping Dorothy with chores when he attacked and forced himself on her, taking advantage of an elderly woman. He was sentenced to life in prison for this awful act. Frank Hayes, an American jockey, achieved a remarkable yet tragic victory in 1923 in New York. During a horse race, Frank suffered a fatal heart attack, but his body remained upright in the saddle, and his horse, Sweet Kiss, continued running, not knowing his rider was dead, and crossed the finish line first, winning the race. Frank Hayes' death was not discovered until race officials came over to congratulate him on his victory. And he was sadly pronounced dead after the race, making him the only jockey in history to win a race after dying. Frank was buried 3 days later, and the horse Sweet Kiss never raced again and was called Sweet Kiss of Death after this incident. They believe Frank's heart attack was caused by his extreme efforts to meet the weight requirement, as it was reported he went from 142 pounds to 130 pounds in a short amount of time. I can't imagine being at this race and finding out that the man that won was actually dead the entire time. This is extremely eerie, and what a terrible and random death.